Our perceptions of pleasure and pain are more powerful drivers than the actual things. That's how Patrick King kicks off his book, Read People Like a Book. And it really sets the stage for a fascinating exploration of human behavior. We're going to dive deep into Patrick's insights today and hopefully equip you with some tools to better understand the people in your life.
Yeah, Patrick offers a really compelling blend of psychology and practical application. It's not just theory. He gives you actionable techniques to decode people's motivations, behaviors, and even potential deceptions.
Okay, let's start with one of the most fundamental concepts, motivation agent. Patrick argues that understanding why people do things is the key to truly reading them.
He introduces the pleasure principle, a core idea that suggests we are all wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. This isn't just about indulging in luxuries, though. It applies to every decision we make, big or small, conscious or unconscious.
So if we observe someone consistently choosing certain actions or avoiding others, we can start to get a sense of what they find pleasurable and painful.
Exactly. Let's say you notice a coworker always volunteering for presentations but avoiding one-on-one meetings. Perhaps they find public speaking pleasurable and intimate conversations painful. This could give you valuable insight into how to best interact with them.
It's interesting because Patrick points out that our perceptions of pleasure and pain are actually more powerful than the actual things themselves.
This is where it gets really intriguing. Our brains are constantly making predictions about potential outcomes based on past experiences, beliefs, and even our current emotional state. Someone might avoid a perfectly safe activity because they perceive it as dangerous, while another person might chase after something harmful because they anticipate a positive outcome.
It's like we're all living in our own individually curated reality shows driven by our unique perceptions.
In a way, yes. And this highlights why understanding someone's perception is crucial to understanding their motivations. It's not enough to just look at the objective facts of a situation. We need to consider how the individual is interpreting those facts.
Patrick then introduces a framework for understanding human needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's a classic psychological concept, but he gives it a fresh spin by showing how it can be used to read people. Can you walk us through the levels of the pyramid?
The foundation of the pyramid is physiological needs like food, water, and shelter. These are the things we need to survive. Above that is the need for safety and security. Then comes the need for love and belonging, our desire for connection and intimacy. Moving up, we have esteem, which includes our need for respect, achievement, and recognition. And at the very top is self-actualization, the need to fulfill our potential and live a meaningful life.
So by understanding where someone might be on this pyramid, we can better understand their motivations.
Absolutely. Someone struggling to meet their basic needs will be driven by very different motivations than someone who is secure in those areas and striving for creative fulfillment or making a difference in the world. Think about a student who is failing several classes. Perhaps they're not lazy, but dealing with an unstable home life, making it difficult to focus on their studies. Their behavior might stem from unmet needs lower on the pyramid.
Now, one of the most interesting concepts Patrick explores is the shadow self. This feels less textbook and more like we're stepping into some deeper psychological waters. What exactly is the shadow, and how can we recognize it in ourselves and others?
Patrick draws on the work of Carl Jung, who proposed that we all have a shadow side. It's a part of our personality that contains aspects we deem unacceptable or undesirable. These can be negative traits like anger or jealousy, but they can also be positive qualities we've been taught to repress, such as assertiveness or ambition.
So the shadow isn't necessarily all bad stuff hiding down there.
Exactly. It encompasses anything that doesn't fit into our conscious self-image. And often these repressed aspects can influence our behavior in unconscious ways. We might project those qualities on others or act them out in ways we don't fully understand.
So how do we spot the shadow at play?
It's about paying attention to those moments when someone's behavior seems out of character or disproportionate to the situation. For example, imagine a friend who prides themselves on being calm and collected, suddenly losing their temper over a minor inconvenience. This outburst might offer a glimpse into their shadow side, revealing repressed anger or frustration they typically keep hidden. Recognizing these shadow behaviors in ourselves is equally important. Journaling or talking to a therapist can help us uncover those hidden parts of ourselves and understand how they might be influencing our actions and interactions.
So becoming aware of our shadow can help us avoid projecting it onto others and lead to greater self-awareness and compassion. Now let's move into the realm of body language. Patrick describes it as a silent symphony of cues and signals. It feels like there's a whole world of information we're missing out on if we're not paying attention.
Patrick delves into micro-expressions, those fleeting facial expressions that flash across our faces in a fraction of a second. They often happen involuntarily and can reveal concealed emotions, providing a glimpse into what someone might be truly feeling, even if their words say otherwise.
It's like our faces are betraying our true emotions, even if for just a moment. Can you give us an example of how a microexpression might play out in a real-life scenario?
Okay, imagine you're congratulating a colleague on their promotion. They smile and thank you, but for a fleeting moment you catch a flash of resentment in their eyes. That microexpression could suggest that while they're outwardly expressing happiness, there might be some underlying envy or frustration.
So those split-second expressions can offer valuable clues, especially when they contradict someone's spoken words. But how can we train ourselves to spot these microexpressions? They happen so quickly, it seems like you'd need superhuman reflexes.
Patrick highlights the work of Paul Ekman, who identified 7 universal microexpressions linked to basic emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, disgust, and contempt. Each involves specific, subtle movements of facial muscles. Becoming familiar with these microexpressions can help us recognize them in others, but it does take practice.
It sounds like paying attention to those subtle facial cues, especially during key moments in a conversation, can give us a real edge in understanding what's truly going on beneath the surface. Now, aside from microexpressions, what are some other body language basics we should be aware of?
Patrick explains that our bodies constantly signal things like comfort, discomfort, dominance, or submission, often without us even realizing it. Take leaning in, for instance. This generally indicates interest and engagement. Conversely, leaning back can signal disinterest or discomfort.
It's like our bodies are having a conversation of their own, revealing our true feelings and attitudes even when we're trying to keep them under wraps.
Precisely. Open postures like uncrossed arms and legs often convey openness and approachability, while closed postures like crossed arms and legs can suggest defensiveness or a desire to create a barrier. Paying attention to these postures can provide insights into someone's emotional state and their receptiveness to what you're saying.
I'm already starting to think about all those awkward first dates where I sat with my arms crossed, unintentionally sending signals of disinterest.
We've all been there. Another fascinating aspect of body language is mirroring. When we like or agree with someone, we tend to unconsciously mimic their body language. This mirroring is a way of building rapport and demonstrating that we're on the same wavelength. You'll notice that when two people have a good connection, their body language often becomes synchronized.
So if someone is mirroring our movements, it's a positive sign that they're feeling connected to us. But does a lack of mirroring always mean there's a disconnect?
Not necessarily. It's important to consider the context and individual personality differences. Someone might not be mirroring you simply because they're not particularly expressive or because they're feeling self-conscious. However, a sudden lack of mirroring where it was previously present could indicate a shift in the dynamic or a change in their feelings towards you.
This is all making me wonder how much control we actually have over our body language. Can we consciously manipulate it to send specific messages?
It's a fascinating question, and Patrick addresses it directly. While we can become more aware of our body language and make conscious choices to adjust it, our true feelings often leak out through subtle, nonverbal cues, even when we're trying our best to control them. Think about a job interview. You might be consciously trying to project confidence, but if you're feeling nervous or unsure of yourself, those feelings might leak out through fidgeting a shaky voice or avoiding eye contact.
It seems like the key is to be aware of our body language, both consciously and unconsciously. We can try to project certain messages intentionally, but also pay attention to those involuntary cues that might be betraying our true feelings. Now, I'm curious about what Patrick has to say about reading between the lines, those subtle clues hidden in someone's word choice and possessions. Can we really glean insights into someone's personality just by paying attention to their vocabulary or what they have in their home?
Patrick argues that our words, the objects we surround ourselves with, and even our online presence can provide valuable insights into our personalities, values, and aspirations. It's like being a detective, looking for those telling details that paint a picture of who we are.
I'm ready to put on my detective hat. Let's dive into the specifics. Where should we start?
Well, let's begin with word choice. Patrick points out that the words we use can reveal a lot about our personality, education level, emotional state, and even our cultural background. For example, someone who consistently uses complex vocabulary and sophisticated sentence structure might be signaling a high level of education or a desire to be perceived as intelligent. On the other hand, someone who uses more casual language and slang might be conveying a sense of informality and approachability.
It's not just about what we're saying, but how we're saying it. The words we choose can be incredibly revealing.
Precisely. Patrick also points out that the emotional tone of someone's language can be incredibly telling. Someone who frequently uses emotionally charged words, especially negative ones, might be signaling a tendency towards negativity or a heightened emotional state.
So if someone is constantly complaining or using dramatic language, it might be a red flag.
It could be, especially if it's a consistent pattern. Pay attention to the pronouns people use as well. Someone who frequently uses I statements might be signaling a focus on themselves and their own needs, while someone who often uses we statements might be conveying a sense of collaboration and shared goals.
These are great insights. I'm already starting to analyze my own word choices and how they might be perceived by others. Now, what about possessions? Can our belongings really tell us something about who we are?
Patrick argues that our homes, clothes, and belongings can be seen as extensions of our personalities and values. They reflect our tastes, our priorities, and even our aspirations.
So someone with a meticulously organized home might be signaling a high level of conscientiousness, while someone with a more chaotic space might be more free-spirited or less concerned with order.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just tidiness. The types of objects people display in their homes can be incredibly telling. Someone who has a lot of books on display might be signaling a love of learning or a desire to be seen as intellectual. Someone who showcases travel souvenirs might be conveying a sense of adventure and worldliness. And someone who has a lot of family photos prominently displayed might be signaling the importance of family and close relationships.
It's amazing how much we can learn about someone just by observing their surroundings. Their belongings can speak volumes about their values and interests.
Indeed. And this principle extends to our clothing choices as well.
Yeah.
Someone who dresses impeccably and pays close attention to detail might be signaling a desire to project an image of success and sophistication, while someone who dresses more casually and comfortably might be prioritizing practicality and self-expression.
It's fascinating how these seemingly insignificant details can provide such valuable insights into someone's personality. I'm starting to see the world as one giant personality test. Everywhere I look, there are clues waiting to be decoded.
That's the beauty of becoming a more astute observer of human behavior. You start to see the world through a new lens, picking up on those subtle cues and signals that most people miss.
This has been an eye-opening exploration of how we can read between the lines, deciphering the hidden messages in people's words and possessions. It's like we're unlocking a secret code to understanding human behavior. Okay, so now, let's get into one of the most intriguing and often misunderstood aspects of reading people: lie detection. Is it really possible to spot a liar, or are we all just susceptible to being fooled?
Patrick acknowledges that most people, even professionals, are surprisingly bad at detecting lies. You know, those common tells we often hear about, like fidgeting or avoiding eye contact, are actually unreliable indicators.
So those classic signs from TV and movies like a shifty gaze or a nervous twitch don't really hold up in real life.
Well, not necessarily. Those behaviors can be caused by a variety of factors: nervousness, discomfort, or even just individual personality quirks.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily mean someone is lying. Someone might avoid eye contact because they're shy, not because they're hiding something.
So if those common cues aren't reliable, what strategies can we use to become better lie detectors?
Patrick emphasizes that it's less about looking for specific body language cues and more about paying close attention to the conversation itself. He suggests focusing on inconsistencies in the person's story, emotional responses that don't match their words, and their overall demeanor when faced with challenging questions.
So it's about looking for those moments where something feels off or doesn't quite add up.
Exactly. One strategy Patrick suggests is asking unexpected questions to catch a liar off guard. When someone is telling a fabricated story, they often have a rehearsed script in their mind. Throwing them a curveball question can disrupt that script and potentially lead to revealing slip-ups.
That's a clever tactic. I can imagine it would be pretty hard to keep a lie straight if you're constantly having to think on your feet.
Another approach Patrick recommends is withholding information to see if the person accidentally reveals something they were trying to hide. Let's say you suspect someone of being involved in a particular incident, but you don't reveal all the details. If they unknowingly provide information that aligns with the details you withheld, it could be a sign they're not being truthful.
It's like laying a trap to see if they fall into it. It sounds a bit sneaky, but I can see how it could be effective.
Patrick also reminds us to look for inconsistencies in the person's story over time. If they change their account of events or offer conflicting details, it could be a red flag.
So taking good mental notes and paying attention to those inconsistencies is key.
Absolutely. And finally, Patrick stresses the importance of listening to our gut instincts. He suggests that while we shouldn't rely solely on intuition, we also shouldn't dismiss those gut feelings when something feels off. Our unconscious mind often picks up on subtle cues that our conscious mind misses.
That makes sense. We've all had those moments where something just doesn't feel right, even if we can't quite put our finger on why. Before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more concept: thin slicing. Patrick explains how we often make quick judgments about people based on limited information, those first impressions that can be surprisingly accurate.
Right. Research has shown that these initial assessments, while not always perfect, can be remarkably insightful. They draw on our subconscious observations of body language, facial expressions, and other subtle cues. Think about meeting someone for the first time. In just a few seconds, you might form an impression of them as trustworthy, arrogant, or kind. These snap judgments are examples of thin slicing in action.
But isn't it dangerous to rely on those quick judgments? We don't want to fall into the trap of stereotyping or making unfair assumptions.
You're absolutely right. Patrick emphasizes that while thin slicing can be a powerful tool, it's essential to use it in conjunction with critical thinking and further observation. Those initial impressions should be a starting point, not a definitive conclusion.
So we should use those first impressions as a hypothesis to be tested and refined as we gather more information.
Precisely. And that's where the other techniques we've discussed, reading body language, paying attention to word choice, understanding motivations, come into play. They provide us with a framework for evaluating those initial impressions and making more informed judgments.
This has been an incredible deep dive into Patrick's book, Read People Like a Book. We've covered so much ground, from the psychology of motivation to the nuances of body language and the art of lie detection. I feel like I have a whole new toolbox for understanding the people in my life.
And remember, this is just a taste of what Patrick covers in his book. There's a wealth of fascinating information and practical techniques waiting to be explored.
If you're interested in learning more about how to read people like a book, we highly encourage you to check out the book. You can find the link in the episode description. And don't forget to like and subscribe to By the Pages for more deep dives into fascinating books and ideas. Thanks for joining us.